The year is 1872. San Francisco is a city built on the echoes of the gold rush, a place where fortunes are made overnight and lost before breakfast. But lately, a new secret is circulating. In the shadowy corners of the city's most exclusive gentlemen's clubs, amidst the scent of expensive cigars and fine brandy, the wealthiest men in America are whispering. They aren't talking about gold anymore. Gold is common. They are talking about something much rarer: diamonds, rubies, emeralds, sapphires. Two humble miners, dressed in tattered wool coats and covered in the thick, alkaline dust of the trail, walk into a prestigious bank. They look out of place on the polished marble floors. They carry a heavy, weathered leather bag, gripped tightly as if their lives depend on it. When the banker opens it in the privacy of his office, his breath catches in his throat. Spilling onto the dark mahogany desk is a pile of raw gemstones so large, so brilliant, they look like they belong in a fairy tale. The miners, Philip Arnold and John Slack, claim they found a mountain of gems somewhere in the vast, uncharted American West, a place where you can reach into the dirt and pull out a fortune. They offer to show the location, but only to those they trust, and for a very high price. Soon the most powerful bankers, legendary generals, and high-profile politicians in the country are pouring their life savings into this mysterious diamond field. But as the world prepares for the biggest mining boom in human history, a single geologist notices something impossible, something that defies the laws of nature. And the discovery of the century is about to become the most elaborate, embarrassing, and expensive scam in the history of the United States. To understand why some of the smartest men in America fell for this, you have to understand the era. This was the Gilded Age. America was expanding at a breakneck pace. The Transcontinental Railroad had just been finished. The wilderness was being tamed, and every week brought news of a new strike. People believed in the big bonanza. If you could find silver in Nevada and gold in California, why couldn't there be diamonds in the Rockies? The stakes weren't just financial, they were national. At the time, the British Empire held a terrifyingly tight grip on the world's diamond supply through their mines in South Africa. If America had its own diamond fields, it would shift the global balance of power. It would make the US the center of the gemstone trade. It was a matter of national pride. It was manifest destiny with a sparkle. For the investors, this wasn't just a business deal. It was a chance to become the next Rothschilds or Vanderbilts. But greed has a unique way of hijacking the human brain. It creates a blind spot exactly where the skepticism should be. And the men behind this scam, Philip Arnold and John Slack, were masters of human psychology. They knew that if you want to catch a big fish, you don't chase it. You make the fish think it's chasing you. Philip Arnold and John Slack weren't your typical high society con artists. They didn't wear top hats or silk vests. They were cousins from Kentucky, rugged, quiet, and weathered by years of actual mining experience. And that was their greatest asset. They looked honest. They didn't go around knocking on doors to sell their idea. Instead, they played the reluctant miners. They walked into the Bank of California in San Francisco and asked for a safety deposit box to store their find. They acted suspicious. They acted paranoid. They pretended they were afraid of being robbed by big city sharks. This performance was brilliant. It made the bankers desperate to get in on the secret. The lead investor was William Ralston, the founder of the Bank of California, and perhaps the most powerful man in the West. To Ralston, Arnold and Slack were just two simple country boys who had stumbled onto a fortune they weren't smart enough to manage. He brought in the heavy hitters to form a syndicate. He recruited Baron von Rothschild of London via telegram. He brought in Civil War legend General George B. McClellan. He even recruited Charles Tiffany, the founder of Tiffany Co, to evaluate the gems. These were the titans of the 19th century. They were sophisticated, educated, and vastly experienced. But they were all about to be taken for a ride by two Kentucky cousins who hadn't even finished grade school. For a problem begins. The blindfolded inspection. The investors were greedy, but they weren't completely stupid. They demanded proof. They wanted to see the new Golconda with their own eyes. Arnold and Slack agreed, but they set the rules. They told the investors that until the final payment was made, the location had to remain a secret. The inspection team was led by Henry Genin, the most respected mining engineer in the country. To get there, the party was taken on a dizzying multi-day journey by train and then by horse. To ensure they couldn't map the route, Arnold and Slack forced the experts to wear blindfolds for large sections of the trek. They were led in circles. They were taken through mountain passes and across rivers until they were completely disoriented. Finally, in a remote corner of the wilderness, on a plateau in Wyoming, the blindfolds were removed. The scene was like something out of a dream. As the sun hit the ground, the earth itself seemed to shimmer. Henry Genin and the other inspectors began to dig with their pocket knives. Within minutes, they were pulling raw diamonds out of the dirt. Then they found rubies, then emeralds. Genin, a man who had seen every fake mine in the West, was mesmerized. He spent 2 days exploring the plateau. He estimated that a single acre of this ground was worth $5,000, and there were thousands of acres. He wrote a glowing, breathless report. Based on the word of the top expert, the investors officially formed the San Francisco and New York Mining and Commercial Company. They handed Arnold and Slack a final payment of roughly $600,000. In today's money, that's about $15 million. The miners took the cash, tipped their hats, and quietly hopped on a train back to Kentucky. They were gone. And that's when the diamonds started to lose their luster. Now a heist this elaborate, the blindfolds, the secret treks, the high-stakes boardroom meetings, it all feels like a movie. And if you're a creator, you know that the only way to make your audience feel that tension is through the right sound. That's why I use epidemic sound. When I was writing the script for the blindfolded trek through the Wyoming mountains, I knew I needed something that felt mysterious and slightly unsettling. I went into the Epidemic Library, searched for 19th century atmospheric, and found the perfect orchestral track that built the suspense as the blindfolds were lifted. Whether you need the sound of a vintage telegraph machine, the bustle of a 1870s San Francisco street, or a sweeping cinematic score for a big reveal, Epidemic Sound has over 40,000 tracks and 90,000 sound effects that are all royalty-free. That means once you have a subscription, you can use the music on YouTube, TikTok, or Instagram without ever worrying about a copyright strike. Stop using the same 3 generic songs everyone else uses. Give your stories the professional edge they deserve. Check out the link in the description to start your free trial today. Now let's see how a single geologist brought this whole empire of glass crashing down. The company was now a legal entity. Stock certificates were being printed. The diamond fever was sweeping the nation. But there was one man who hadn't been invited to the party: Clarence King. King was a brilliant geologist and the leader of the U.S. Geological Survey. He was a man of science, not a man of speculation. When he read Henry Genin's report in the newspapers, he didn't feel excitement. He felt deep, nagging suspicion. You see, King knew the geology of the American West better than almost anyone alive, and something in the report bothered him. In nature, diamonds and rubies are formed in completely different geological environments. Finding them all sitting together in the same patch of dirt in the Wyoming desert was a geological impossibility. It was like saying you found a polar bear, a lion, and a penguin all living in the same backyard. It just doesn't happen. King knew that if this mine was a fraud, it would destroy the reputation of American science. He decided to find the diamond field himself. He didn't have a map, but he was a master tracker. Using the vague descriptions from Genin's report, King and his team narrowed down the location to a remote plateau near the Wyoming-Colorado border. They rode through the night. When they arrived at the site, the sun was just beginning to rise. At first, King was shocked. He looked down and saw a diamond reflecting the morning light. For a moment he thought, could the laws of geology be wrong? Is this place actually a miracle? But Clarence King was a scientist. He didn't just look at the gems. He looked at the ground. King began to notice things the experts had missed because they were too busy filling their pockets. First, he noticed that the diamonds were only found on the very surface of the soil. When he dug a foot deep, there was nothing but ordinary sand and rock. Then he noticed that many of the gems were found in places that made no sense, like in the cracks of logs or balanced on rocks where the wind should have blown them away. But the aha moment came when he inspected a large anthill. He saw something glittering in the mound of dirt. He reached down and pulled out a small diamond. It looked like the ants had mined it and brought it to the surface. But when he pulled out his magnifying glass, he saw something that chilled him. The diamond had a tiny, flat facet. It had been cut. Diamonds in nature are rough and look like cloudy pebbles. This stone had clearly been worked by a jeweler's wheel. Then King found a ruby that upon closer inspection turned out to be a piece of red glass, likely from a cheap bead. He realized exactly what Arnold and Slack had done. The miners hadn't found a mine. They had gone to London months earlier and bought $15,000 worth of industrial-grade diamonds and bort, waste stones. They had salted the earth, poking the gems into the dirt with the tips of their walking sticks. They had even placed them in the anthills to create a natural look. King didn't go to the newspapers first. He telegraphed the company directors. "The diamond fields are utterly fraudulent. They have been artificially prepared." The news hit San Francisco like an earthquake. The company collapsed instantly. The stock was now worth less than the ink used to print it. The wealthy investors were the laughingstock of the nation. William Ralston, the great banker, was devastated. He resigned from his positions and spent much of his personal fortune buying back the shares from the smaller investors to save his reputation. He died just a few years later, many say from the stress and shame of the scandal. But what about the Kentucky cousins? John Slack vanished. He changed his name and reportedly ended up as a humble coffin maker in New Mexico, taking his secrets to the grave. Philip Arnold, the mastermind, retreated to Kentucky. He used his wealth to hire the best lawyers and argued that he had actually found the gems. And if the investors were too stupid to do their own research, that wasn't his fault. He eventually settled out of court, keeping about $150,000 of the stolen money. He lived like a king until he was killed in a shootout over a separate business dispute years later. The hoax forced the U.S. government to take mining fraud seriously and helped professionalize the U.S. Geological Survey. Clarence King became a national hero, the man whose integrity was harder than a diamond. The Great Diamond Hoax is more than just a story about two clever crooks. It's a story about the psychology of the sure thing. The investors fell for the scam because they wanted it to be true. They saw the humble miners and assumed they were too simple to pull off a fraud. Arnold and Slack understood that the best way to lie to someone is to give them exactly what they're dreaming of. It's a reminder that even the most sophisticated among us can be blinded by the promise of easy wealth. In the 1870s, it was salted diamond fields in Wyoming. Today, it might be a suspicious crypto coin or a guaranteed stock tip. The tools change, but human nature stays the same. If you ever find yourself looking at a mountain of gems that seems too good to be true, take a lesson from Clarence King. Get out your magnifying glass. Look at the anthills. And remember, the only thing that's guaranteed in a get-rich-quick scheme is that someone is getting rich, and it's probably the person who brought the bag.